Sandra Bullock never imagined Keanu Reeves would be her date that night. The evening began like any other quiet evening for Sandra Bullock. She had been working on a new script all day, her mind lost between the words on the page and the silence of her home. She was not expecting anything extraordinary to happen. In fact, she had told herself that night would be for rest. Her life had been moving fast, filled with public events, interviews, and endless pressure to appear strong. Inside, however, she felt the weight of loneliness. She never admitted it openly, but her heart longed for something genuine, something that was not written in a script or controlled by flashing cameras. The phone rang, and at first she ignored it. She thought it was just another assistant calling about schedules. But when she finally picked up, she was surprised to hear the voice of a close friend. Her friend told her about a small charity dinner happening that night not far from her home. Sandra hesitated. She wanted rest, yet something inside whispered that she should go. Her friend added one detail that caught her attention. She said, "Someone you know will be there. Someone who respects you more than you realize." Sandra's heart raced a little. She asked who, but her friend laughed softly and said, "You will see when you arrive." Curiosity grew inside her, and despite her tiredness, she found herself standing before the mirror. She looked at her reflection, simple yet graceful. She chose a dress that was not too loud, something soft and humble, because she did not want attention that night. She only wanted to feel human. The drive to the dinner felt strangely different. The city lights shimmered, but her thoughts were louder. She kept wondering who this someone might be. Her mind went through old colleagues, old friends, even people she had lost touch with. She thought maybe it was just another actor, or maybe a director who admired her work. Still, she could not shake the small hope inside her heart that whoever it was, it would mean more than just casual greetings. When she stepped inside the hall, everything was warm and glowing. The place was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and faces that seemed familiar. Yet her eyes kept searching, scanning each corner for the mystery presence her friend had mentioned. She smiled politely, exchanged a few words, but deep inside, she felt the suspense rise. Then, across the room, her gaze froze. Standing near a simple table away from the noise was Keanu Reeves. He was not dressed like the others, not trying to shine brighter than anyone else. He wore a calm expression, his presence quiet yet powerful. It had been years since they had shared the same space like this. Memories of the past films they had worked on together rushed into her heart. She remembered his kindness on set, his calm voice, and the way he always treated her with respect that felt rare in their world. For a moment, she could not move. It was as if time itself had slowed. She never expected to see him that night, and the thought of him being the reason her friend insisted she come made her chest tighten with emotion. Keanu noticed her too. His eyes softened, and he walked toward her with the same gentle stride she remembered so well. "It's been a long time," he said quietly, his voice carrying warmth. Sandra smiled, though her heart trembled inside. "Yes, it has. I did not think I would see you here tonight." There was silence between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held meaning, a silence where both hearts remembered the respect and connection they once shared. Then came the twist that left Sandra speechless. Keanu, with his calm tone, asked her if she would sit with him through the evening, not as colleagues, not as old friends from Hollywood, but as his guest. In that moment, Sandra realized her friend had been right. This was not just another dinner. This was something more. She felt the pull of emotions inside her. Part of her wanted to hide, to avoid the whispers that would follow if anyone noticed them together. But another part, the part that longed for kindness and sincerity, told her to say yes. She nodded softly. "I would like that." As they walked toward the table together, Sandra could feel curious eyes watching, but she ignored them. For the first time in a long time, She was not worried about cameras or stories. She was focused only on the quiet man beside her, the man who had never changed, who carried respect in every step. Little did she know that night would unfold in ways she had never imagined. It would test her emotions, bring back memories she thought were gone, and show her a truth about connection, respect, and kindness that no fame could ever replace. The table where Sandra and Keanu sat was set in the corner, away from the loud music and laughter. Candles flickered softly, creating a glow that made the moment feel private even in a crowded room. Sandra sat down, her heart still racing from the unexpected turn of the evening. She looked at Keanu and felt a wave of calmness, as if his quiet energy had the power to silence all the noise inside her mind. Keanu did not start with big words or long stories. Instead, he asked her simple questions, the kind that showed he was really listening. "How have you been? Are you taking care of yourself?" His voice was low, steady, and full of care. Sandra felt her chest tighten. People often asked her about her movies, her career, her next project. Rarely did anyone ask if she was okay, if she was resting, if she was happy. She answered softly, "I am fine. But sometimes it feels like I am only surviving, not really living." She did not know why those words came out so easily. Maybe it was the way his eyes carried no judgment, only respect. Keanu nodded slowly, as though he understood more than the words she spoke. He told her about his own struggles, about how he often preferred to step away from the spotlight to find silence. He spoke about nights when the world felt heavy, about the times when he walked alone just to feel human again. His honesty was disarming, and Sandra felt herself leaning in, as if every word was lifting a burden she had carried in silence. But even in that moment of peace, there was tension building around them. Sandra could sense whispers in the room. People were beginning to notice. Two beloved stars sitting together talking with such closeness would always draw attention. She felt the familiar fear rise, fear of headlines, of false stories, of judgment. She looked down, her hands tightening on the edge of the table. Keanu noticed. He leaned closer and said quietly, "Ignore the noise. Tonight is not about them. Tonight is about being real, even if it is just for a few hours." Those words touched her deeply. She looked into his eyes and saw a man who meant every syllable. She realized he was not there to create a story for the world. He was there to share a moment of truth with her, nothing more, nothing less. As the evening moved on, their conversation grew deeper. They spoke about memories from their first film together, about the times when they laughed between takes, about how fame had changed the world around them but never really changed who they were inside. Sandra found herself smiling, even laughing at moments, something she had not done from the heart in weeks. Then came the unexpected twist. The host of the dinner, a wealthy businessman, approached their table. He greeted them with a smile, but his words carried a tone that Sandra instantly disliked. He praised their success, but in a way that felt empty, almost mocking. Then he made a careless remark, suggesting that people like them only lived for cameras and attention. Sandra felt a sting inside. She had dealt with comments like this before, but tonight it cut deeper because she was already vulnerable. She lowered her eyes, not wanting to react, but Keanu did not stay silent. He looked at the man with calm strength and said, "Respect is not about fame. It is about how you treat people. Every person in this room deserves kindness, whether they are on a screen or not." The room grew quiet for a moment. Sandra looked up at him, her heart swelling with respect. It was not the loud defense of someone trying to win an argument. It was the quiet truth of a man who lived his words. The businessman, embarrassed, muttered something and walked away. Sandra felt a rush of gratitude. She whispered, "Thank you." Keanu smiled softly and replied, "You don't need to thank me. I only said what is true." Inside her, something shifted. She realized she was not just sitting with an old friend. She was sitting with a man whose humility and strength reminded her of values she feared the world had forgotten. As the night went on, their connection grew stronger. The noise of the room faded. It felt like the world had given them a private space to rediscover something pure. Yet, at the back of her mind, Sandra knew this was only the beginning. She could feel a storm coming, something that would test not only her emotions but also the fragile bond forming at that table. The night had already surprised Sandra more than she thought possible, but as the minutes passed, she felt a new tension building. Sitting across from Keanu, she felt safe, yet she could not ignore the eyes around the room. Whispers were turning into curious stares, and the thought of tomorrow's headlines made her uneasy. She had learned to live with attention, but tonight she only wanted peace. Keanu noticed her discomfort. His gaze was calm, steady, almost reassuring, and he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. People will always talk, Sandra, but we don't have to let them decide our story. His words were simple, yet they struck something deep inside her. She realized how much she had allowed fear of judgment to control her choices. She nodded, though her heart still carried doubt. Before she could respond, the host returned, this time bringing a group of guests to their table. He introduced them with exaggerated charm, as if parading them like trophies. Among the guests was a woman Sandra had once worked with on a film, someone she remembered as sharp-tongued and competitive. The woman's smile was polite, but her eyes held an edge. "Sandra," the woman said, her voice loud enough for others nearby to hear, "I must say, you and Keanu make quite a picture tonight. I didn't know you two were so close." The pause in her sentence was deliberate, filled with suggestion. Sandra felt her cheeks grow warm. She opened her mouth to reply, but Keanu spoke first. "We are close because we respect each other," he said evenly. "Sometimes that means more than people realize." The woman laughed lightly, but there was something mocking in it. "Respect is rare in this industry," she replied, her tone sweet but cutting. "I suppose you've both been lucky." Sandra stayed quiet, though her heart pounded. She hated confrontation, but she also hated being misunderstood. Keanu's calm presence kept her from breaking. He did not argue further, did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the woman with a kindness that seemed to disarm her more than anger ever could. Eventually, she looked away, her smile faltering. When the group left, Sandra finally let out the breath she had been holding. "You always know how to stay calm," she whispered. "I don't think I could have handled that without showing how much it hurt." Keanu smiled gently. "Calmness is not about ignoring pain. It is about facing it without letting it control you." Those words sank into her heart. She thought about all the times she had fought silently against loneliness, about the times she smiled for cameras while feeling broken inside. For the first time in years, she felt someone truly understood her struggle without her needing to explain. Just when she began to relax again, another twist came. One of the organizers approached their table and told them that the evening would soon include a moment where guests could share personal stories about kindness and resilience. Each person chosen would stand in front of everyone and speak for a few minutes. Sandra froze when she realized her name was on the list. She looked at Keanu with panic. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I don't want to stand in front of them tonight." He looked at her with steady eyes and asked, "Why not?" She shook her head. "Because if I speak from my heart, they will see too much. And if I stay guarded, my words will mean nothing." Keanu leaned closer. "Maybe. Tonight is the night you don't hide. Maybe your truth will give strength to someone else in this room." His words left her silent. She wanted to argue, but deep inside she knew he was right. She had spent so many years protecting herself, building walls so no one could see the fragile parts of her. But maybe those walls had also kept people from knowing the real her. As her name was called, Sandra stood, her legs trembling. She felt every eye on her as she walked to the small stage. For a moment, she thought about turning back, but then she saw Keanu watching her, his gaze steady, filled with encouragement. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I have lived many years under the light of cameras," she said softly. "And sometimes that light feels warm, but sometimes it feels heavy. People see the smile, the glamour, the success. But what they don't see are the nights when silence feels unbearable, the days when you question your worth, the moments when you only want someone to see you as a human being." Her voice wavered, but she continued. "What keeps me moving forward are the rare moments of kindness, when someone shows respect without asking for anything in return. Those moments remind me that beyond fame and success, we all just need to be understood and cared for." The room grew quiet. For once, no one whispered, no one mocked. Even the competitive woman who had spoken earlier was silent. Her expression softened. When Sandra finished, she returned to the table, her heart racing. Keanu looked at her with quiet pride and said, "That was your truth, and you were stronger than your fear." Tears threatened to fall from her eyes, but she held them back with a trembling smile. Deep inside, she realized something important. This night was changing her, piece by piece, and it was because of the quiet man sitting beside her. When Sandra sat back down after her speech, her heart was still trembling. The silence that had filled the room during her words now lingered inside her chest. She looked at Keanu, and for a brief moment she felt like a child who had finally spoken the truth after years of keeping it hidden. His calm smile reassured her, but deep inside she feared what might follow. As the evening moved forward, people began approaching her, not with mockery or judgment, but with gratitude. One woman, older and gentle in her manner, touched Sandra's hand and said, "Thank you for speaking. I needed to hear that tonight." Another guest nodded respectfully and whispered, "Your honesty made me think about my own silence." These words should have brought Sandra peace, yet she felt exposed. The walls she had built for years had cracked, and now everyone had seen through them. Keanu sensed her unease. "You gave them something real," he told her. "That is why they respect you now." But just when Sandra thought the night was shifting toward hope, a sharp twist cut through the warmth. The same businessman who had mocked them earlier stood up during his turn to speak. His voice was loud, his tone sharp, and his words carried arrogance. "What we need," he said, "is strength, not weakness. Too much honesty only shows fragility. People in this industry should inspire with power, not by admitting they are broken." His eyes shifted briefly toward Sandra as if the words were aimed at her. Whispers began spreading again, this time divided. Some nodded at his statement, while others frowned. Sandra's heart sank, and for a second, she regretted opening herself. Before she could sink deeper into doubt, Keanu stood up. He had not been called to speak, but he walked to the front with steady steps. The room grew silent again, surprised by his quiet defiance. He faced the crowd and said, "Strength is not hiding pain. Strength is the courage to face it and still move forward. Weakness is pretending everything is perfect when inside, you are falling apart." His voice was firm but calm, carrying weight without anger. Honesty is not fragility. It is the foundation of respect. If we cannot be true, then all we show the world is an empty mask. The room fell into silence once more. Even the businessman shifted uncomfortably, his confidence shaken by the calm power in Keanu's words. Sandra watched him, her heart swelling. With gratitude and something even deeper she dared not name, When Keanu returned to the table, he did not boast or look for praise. He simply sat down, took a sip of water, and looked at her with the same gentle steadiness. "Don't let anyone take away the truth you shared," he whispered. Sandra's eyes softened. "You always know how to say the right thing," she replied quietly. But the night was not finished testing them. After the speeches, the guests moved toward the open terrace for fresh air. Sandra and Keanu walked together, the cool breeze washing over them. She felt lighter, but also vulnerable, like a wound had been opened that needed time to heal. On the terrace, the woman who had mocked them earlier approached again, her voice softer this time. "Sandra," she said, "I did not realize how much you were carrying. I judged you without knowing the truth. I am sorry." Sandra was stunned. She had never expected an apology. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. But then she remembered Keanu's words about respect. She took a slow breath and said, "Thank you for saying that. We all have battles no one sees." The woman nodded and stepped back, leaving Sandra with a strange sense of relief. As the night grew deeper, Sandra and Keanu found themselves standing alone near the edge of the terrace, overlooking the city lights. Sandra whispered, "Why do you always stay so calm, even when people try to hurt you?" Keanu paused before answering. "Because anger takes away peace. If I lose peace, I lose myself. I choose to stay calm so I can hold on to who I am." Those words struck her again. She realized that what she admired most in him was not fame, not success, but the quiet strength that came from humility. Just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced down and her breath caught. A message had already been sent to her from a journalist, asking if the rumors were true that she and Keanu had come together as a couple. Her heart sank. The world outside had already noticed, and tomorrow would bring storms. She was not ready. She looked at Keanu, her face pale. "They already know," she whispered. He looked at her calmly, without fear. "Then let them know. The truth cannot hurt us if we stay true to ourselves." Sandra wanted to believe him, but she knew the coming days would not be easy. She could already feel the weight of judgment waiting for her. The night ended quietly, but Sandra's heart did not. When she returned home, she sat by the window, staring at the city lights. Her phone would not stop buzzing. Messages, notifications, and emails were flooding in. Some were from friends, curious about what they had seen. Others were from journalists, demanding confirmation. She knew the headlines would come by morning. Sleep was impossible. Sandra kept replaying the evening in her mind, the calm of Keanu's words, the warmth of his presence, and the storm that now waited outside. She asked herself if she had been foolish to let her guard down. Yet every time she thought of his steady eyes, she felt a small strength rise inside her. By sunrise, the headlines appeared. Photos of her and Keanu sitting together, speaking closely, were everywhere. The stories were filled with assumptions. Some called it beautiful, some called it scandalous, and some mocked it as a staged act for attention. Sandra scrolled through them with a heavy heart. She knew how quickly admiration could turn into judgment. Then her phone rang. It was her manager. The voice on the other end was sharp with worry. "Sandra, this is everywhere. We need to control the story before it grows out of hand. People are already questioning your choices." Sandra closed her eyes. "Choices? I only sat at a table with a friend. Why does it always have to be turned into something else?" "Because that is how the world works," her manager replied. "You have to decide if you want to deny it or if you want to admit it and face the consequences." Tears stung her eyes. She did not want to lie, but she also feared what honesty would cost her. Later that afternoon, she met Keanu at a quiet cafe far from the cameras. When she saw him, the weight on her chest loosened just a little. He greeted her with the same calm smile as though nothing had changed. "The world is talking," she said softly, her voice heavy with worry. "Let them talk," he replied. "Truth does not depend on their words." Sandra shook her head. "But they don't care about truth. They only care about stories, about twisting everything into something loud and empty. They will tear us apart with their words." Keanu leaned forward, his eyes steady. "They can only tear us apart if we let them. Sandra, what matters is not what they say. What matters is who we choose to be." His calmness was like a shelter, but she still trembled. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "It is simple," he said quietly. "But it is not easy." Their conversation was interrupted when a stranger approached their table. It was a young man, nervous but sincere. He looked at Sandra with shy eyes and said, "I just wanted to thank you. Your words last night, they gave me courage. I was planning to quit something important in my life, but you reminded me to keep going." Sandra froze, stunned. Her speech, the one she had feared would expose her weakness, had reached someone's heart. Her eyes softened and she whispered, "Thank you for telling me that." The young man left quickly, but his words stayed with her. She looked at Keanu, her voice trembling. "I never thought my truth could help someone. That is the power of honesty," Keanu replied. "When you speak from the heart, someone will always listen." For a moment, Sandra felt hope rise again. Maybe the storm of headlines was not the whole story. Maybe, hidden behind the noise, there were people who found meaning in her truth. But the storm was far from over. That evening, her manager called. Again, this time with sharper words. "You need to distance yourself, Sandra. Your image is at risk. People are saying you are unstable, that you are being influenced by him. If you don't act now, your career could suffer." Sandra felt the pressure crush her chest. She had worked her whole life to build her name, her respect, her career. Now it felt like all of it was at the mercy of gossip. That night, as she sat alone, she asked herself a painful question. Should she step back from Keanu to protect her image? Or should she stand by him and risk everything? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was not a journalist or her manager. It was Keanu. His message was short, but it carried more weight than all the words she had heard that day. "Stay true to yourself. I will stand with you no matter what." Sandra read those words again and again, tears filling her eyes. She had never felt more torn between fear and courage. The night was heavy with silence as Sandra sat on her couch, staring at the message Keanu had sent. "Stay true to yourself. I will stand with you no matter what." Those words should have brought her peace, yet they carried the weight of a decision she could no longer avoid. Her manager's voice still echoed in her ears. "Protect your image. Protect your career. Distance yourself before it's too late." The fear of losing everything she had built clawed at her. But then another voice rose within her heart, the memory of Keanu's steady eyes and his calm strength. Protect your truth. Protect your soul. Sandra hardly slept. When the morning sun broke through her window, she looked exhausted, but a new determination had begun to form in her heart. She knew she could not keep living under the control of fear. Later that day, she asked Keanu to meet her at a quiet park, a place surrounded by trees where they could breathe without cameras. When she saw him waiting on a bench, simple and calm, as always, she felt the storm inside her ease just a little. "I don't know what to do," she admitted as she sat beside him. "Everyone is telling me to step back, to protect myself, to protect my career. But when I think about walking away, it feels like I am betraying not just you, but myself." Keanu listened quietly, his eyes fixed on the trees swaying in the wind. After a long pause, he said, "Fear always asks us to protect the wrong things. If you protect an image, you lose your soul. If you protect your truth, you may lose the world, but you will keep yourself. Only you can decide which loss you can live with. Sandra felt tears gather in her eyes. I'm scared, Keanu. What if I lose everything? He looked at her gently. Then you will find a new everything. Something real, something that belongs to you and not to their stories. His words broke through her fear, but before she could reply, voices interrupted them. Two strangers had recognized them and began whispering while pretending to take pictures on their phones. Sandra's heart sank. The storm she feared was finding them even here. This will never stop, she whispered bitterly. Everywhere we go, someone will be watching. Keanu turned to her, his expression calm but firm. Then let them watch. Let them see respect. Let them see kindness. Let them see two people who are not afraid to be real. The strangers walked away, leaving them alone again. But Sandra's chest was still heavy. She looked at him with trembling eyes. Why do you always stand so strong when the world tries to break you? He gave a soft smile. Because I have already lost things that can never return. When you survive that kind of pain, you learn that no rumor, no headline, no judgment can truly break you. His honesty struck her deeply. She remembered the tragedies he had faced in his life, the losses that would have crushed anyone else. Yet here he was, sitting beside her, gentle and unbroken, carrying his strength in silence. For the first time in days, Sandra felt clarity. She realized the world could take away her comfort, her fame, her career, but it could not take away her truth unless she gave it to them. That evening, she made her choice. Instead of releasing a denial, instead of hiding, she asked her manager to schedule an interview. Not for damage control, but for honesty. When the interview aired, Sandra spoke calmly, her voice steady but emotional. What the world saw that night was not a performance. It was two people sharing respect and kindness. I will not deny that. I will not pretend it was something it wasn't. I choose to stand by what is real, even if the world misunderstands it. The reaction was immediate. Some praised her courage, others criticized her words, but for the first time, Sandra felt no fear. She had chosen her truth, and it gave her strength. After the interview, she sat in silence, waiting. Then her phone rang. It was Keanu. His voice was calm, filled with quiet pride. You did it, Sandra. You stood by yourself. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, I only found the strength because you reminded me it was there. Yet, even in that moment of victory, Sandra knew the storm was not over. She had chosen truth, but the world was not kind to those who broke their silence. Days passed after Sandra's interview, and the storm only grew louder. The headlines kept multiplying, some calling her brave, others calling her reckless. Television. Hosts debated her words. Social media swirled with endless opinions, and people she barely knew reached out with either praise or criticism. But through all of it, one thing became clear to Sandra. She was no longer afraid of the noise. Every time she felt the weight of judgment, she remembered the faces of the few who had told her that her honesty had touched their hearts. Those voices mattered more than the shouting crowd. Still, the pressure tested her every day. One morning, she received a call from a producer about a major project she had been considered for. His words were polite but cold. We are moving in another direction, he said. Sandra knew what that meant. Her choice to be honest had cost her opportunities. For a moment, the fear tried to rise again. Later that evening, she met Keanu once more, this time at a quiet bookstore he often visited. When she told him about the lost project, her voice cracked. They are already closing doors on me. Maybe I made the wrong choice. Keanu shook his head gently. A closed door does not mean you are lost. It only means you are being guided to another path. You chose truth, Sandra. Don't let regret steal the peace you have gained." She looked at him with tired eyes. "How do you always know what to say?" He smiled softly. "Because I have lived long enough to know that peace is worth more than approval." Those words stayed in her heart. And then, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at her home, written by hand. It was from a young girl who had watched the interview. "Dear Sandra." The letter read, "Thank you for being honest. I was ashamed of my struggles, but when you spoke, I felt less alone. You gave me courage to tell my family the truth about what I have been going through. You saved me." Sandra held the letter close, tears falling freely. In that moment, she understood the depth of what Keanu had been telling her all along. The truth might cost her roles, headlines might twist her story, but if even one life had been touched, it was worth it. The final test came at another public event a week later. Sandra and Keanu arrived together, and as expected, the cameras surrounded them. Questions flew from every direction. "Are you together? Is this for attention? Are you ready for the backlash?" Sandra looked at Keanu, and for the first time, she did not hesitate. She smiled softly and said, "What you see here is respect, kindness, and honesty. It is not for attention. It is not for the cameras. It is simply real. If people choose to misunderstand that, it will not change the truth." The reporters grew louder, but Sandra felt light, almost free. She had spoken with courage, and she no longer cared what stories would be written tomorrow. Keanu stood beside her, his calm presence like a shield. Later that night, as they walked away from the noise, Sandra whispered, "I never imagined that one dinner would change everything." Keanu looked at her gently. "Sometimes the moments we don't plan are the ones that save us." They walked in silence for a while, the city lights shining around them. For the first time in years, Sandra felt no emptiness, no fear. She felt whole, not because the world approved of her, but because she had finally chosen to be real. She knew the road ahead would not always be easy. The world would still judge. Doors might still close, but she also knew she would never face it alone. Keanu had shown her that respect and kindness could stand stronger than any storm, and her own voice had proven that honesty could light even the darkest night.